I've been waiting 3 years for this moment, and it finally happened last Thursday. My parents, Walter and Judith, along with my sister, Sadie, thought they could blindside me with their little real estate scheme. They thought I was the same broke college dropout they've been treating like garbage since I was 19. They were wrong. Some background, because you need to understand how we got here. I'm 26 now, and my family has never let me forget that I'm the disappointment. When I dropped out of business school to work construction, my dad told everyone at his golf club that I was throwing my life away. When I moved back into our childhood home after college to save money, my sister started telling her friends she was embarrassed to bring anyone over because her loser brother lived there. My mom would introduce me to neighbors as her son who was still figuring things out, like I was some kind of charity case. The house belonged to my grandmother, Rose, originally. She raised me there after my parents divorced when I was 8, then got back together when I was 12. Rose died 4 years ago, and everyone just assumed the house went to my parents because they'd been living there and handling her finances toward the end. I never said anything different because I had my reasons. Here's what they don't know. I've been working 60-hour weeks in construction, doing side jobs on weekends, and living like a monk for 3 years. Not because I'm lost or figuring things out, but because I've been preparing. Every dollar I saved, every connection I made, every skill I learned was building towards something they never saw coming. So Thursday rolls around and we're sitting down for Thanksgiving dinner. My parents had been acting weird all week, whispering to each other and getting quiet whenever I walked into rooms. Sadie kept smirking at me like she knew some big secret. I played dumb because I already knew what was happening. We get through the turkey and stuffing, and then Walter clears his throat with that self-important look he gets when he thinks he's about to deliver some life lesson. He starts going on about how it's time for me to take responsibility for my future and stop depending on family handouts. I'm just nodding along, letting him build up to whatever this is. Then Judith slides these glossy real estate brochures across the table. All Florida properties, condos and townhouses with price ranges I couldn't afford on a construction worker's salary. She tells me they've been thinking about downsizing and moving somewhere warmer. And isn't it exciting that they found such beautiful options? That's when Sadie jumps in with the real punchline. She explains how they've already talked to a realtor about listing our house and how the market is perfect right now for selling. She's practically glowing as she tells me how much equity they're sitting on, how they can get a great place in Florida and still have money left over. Walter leans back in his chair and delivers what he thinks is the killing blow. He tells me they know this is sudden, but I'm young and resilient and this could be the push I need to finally make something of myself. Maybe I can find a nice apartment closer to work. Start building my own life instead of hiding out in my childhood bedroom. The whole time they're talking, I'm just sitting there cutting my turkey and nodding like, this makes perfect sense. Sadie is watching me for some kind of breakdown or panic, but I stay completely calm. This is exactly what I've been waiting for. Then comes the part that really shows you who these people are. Judith starts talking about how they've always worried about me, how they've tried to be supportive, but maybe they've been enabling my lack of direction. She says sometimes tough love is what a person needs to reach their potential. Sadie adds that her friends have been asking why a grown man still lives with his parents and how awkward it's been for her to explain. She actually says she's looking forward to finally having a normal family situation when they move to Florida. Walter wraps it up by telling me they're planning to list the house after New Year's. So I have about 6 weeks to find somewhere else to live. He slides a business card across the table for some apartment complex downtown, says he already called and they have availability in January. The three of them are sitting there looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to either thank them for this opportunity or start begging them to reconsider. Instead, I just finish my bite of turkey and ask if there's more cranberry sauce. Sadie actually laughs and tells Walter that I'm probably in shock, that it hasn't hit me yet. She says I always was slow to process big changes. That's when I reach into my jacket pocket and pull out a manila envelope I've been carrying around for weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. I set it on the table next to the Florida brochures and tell them there might be one small problem with their real estate plans. Walter asks what's in the envelope and I can see he's starting to get annoyed that I'm not reacting the way they expected. I tell him it's just some paperwork they might find interesting, particularly the documents on top. Judith opens the envelope and starts reading. I watch her face change as she realizes what she's looking at. She passes the first page to Walter and he goes completely silent. Sadie grabs for the papers, but Walter holds them away from her while he keeps reading. His face is turning red and I can see the exact moment when he understands what this means for their Florida retirement plan. Finally, Sadie snatches the papers and starts reading out loud. That's when she gets to the part about the original deed and starts saying that this can't be right, that there must be some mistake. I tell them there's no mistake and that we should probably call their realtor to cancel that listing appointment. The house has never belonged to them and it never will. Walter demands to know where I got these documents and how long I've known about this. I explain that I've known since the day Rose died, and I've been waiting to see exactly how far they'd go when they thought they had all the power. Judith asks what this means, and I tell her it means their retirement plans just got a lot more complicated. Sadie wants to know what happens to her wedding funding now that their real estate windfall isn't happening. I stand up from the table and tell them we'll need to discuss new living arrangements since I'll be making some changes to how this household operates. Walter starts yelling about ungrateful children and family loyalty, but I'm already walking away. As I head upstairs, I hear Sadie on the phone canceling the realtor appointment. 3 years of planning and it's finally starting to pay off. Tomorrow I'm calling their lawyer to verify everything officially. After that, we'll see how quickly their attitude toward their disappointment son changes when they realize I hold all the cards now. This is just the beginning. Update 1. Holy hell, you guys. The fallout from Thanksgiving has been absolutely insane. I thought showing them the deed would be the end of it, but apparently my family is more delusional than I realized. The lawyer came Friday night and watching their faces crumble as he confirmed everything was better than any holiday dessert. First, let me address some comments from my original post. A bunch of you asked why I waited so long to reveal the inheritance and whether I feel bad about tricking them. Here's the thing, I didn't trick anyone. They made assumptions about what belonged to them and built their entire retirement plan around stealing from me. I just let them show me exactly who they are when they think they have power. So Friday evening, Walter calls this lawyer he knows, some guy who handles real estate transactions for his golf buddies. Walter spends the whole day building up this narrative about how there must be some clerical error, how Rose was getting confused toward the end and probably signed something she didn't understand. The lawyer shows up around 7 and Walter immediately starts laying out his case. He's got bank statements showing he paid property taxes, utility bills in his name, maintenance receipts going back years. He's convinced he can prove some kind of adverse possession claim or that Rose's will was invalid. The lawyer, I'll call him Peterson, sits there going through my documents while Walter talks. You can see Peterson's face change as he realizes Walter has no legal standing whatsoever. Every document I have is legitimate, properly filed, and ironclad. Walter keeps pushing, asking if there's any way to challenge the will based on Rose's mental state when she signed it. Peterson explains that Rose's will was executed 4 years ago with 2 witnesses and a notary, and there's no evidence of diminished capacity. The will is crystal clear. Everything goes to me. That's when Judith jumps in with this desperate attempt at emotional manipulation. She starts talking about how Rose always said she wanted the family to stay together, how she wouldn't have wanted us fighting over money. Peterson just stares at her and explains that Rose's actual wishes are documented in legal writing, not family folklore. Sadie asked the question they're all thinking. If I've owned the house for 4 years, why haven't I said anything until now? I tell them the truth. I wanted to see what kind of people they were when they thought they could control my future. I wanted to know if they'd help their son succeed or try to push me out the moment it benefited them. Walter explodes at this point. He starts yelling about how ungrateful I am, how they've been supporting me for years, letting me live rent-free while I figured out my life. He demands to know what other secrets I'm keeping from the family. So I tell him about the 3 rental properties Rose left me in Millfield County. Small houses that have been generating steady income while I lived here, quietly building my construction business. I explain about the investment account that's been growing for 4 years and the business equipment I've been purchasing with rental income. The room goes completely silent. You could hear a pin drop while they process that their failure son has been financially independent this entire time. Judith finally asks why I've been living like I'm broke if I have money. I explain that I wanted to see how they treat someone they thought was beneath them. I wanted to know if their love came with conditions about my income and success. Walter's face is getting redder by the minute. He starts demanding that I pay them back for all the household expenses they've covered, all the utilities and maintenance and property taxes. Peterson clears his throat and mentions that since I'm the actual property owner, Walter technically owes me fair market rent for the past 4 years minus any legitimate maintenance expenses. That's when the real desperation kicks in. Judith starts talking about how this changes everything for their retirement plans, how they can't afford Florida without the house sale proceeds. Sadie mentions her wedding expenses and how they'd promised to help with the reception costs. I tell them that's not my problem. They built their financial plans around assets they didn't own, money they thought they could steal from me. The consequences of that planning failure are theirs to handle. Walter tries a different approach. He starts talking about family loyalty and how Rose would want us to work together. He suggests we could split the inheritance fairly since they've been maintaining the property all these years. Maybe I could keep the house and give them the rental properties, or we could sell everything and divide the proceeds. I just look at him and ask if he's lost his mind. This isn't a negotiation. The inheritance is mine. Period. If they want to stay in the house, they can pay market rent. If they want to move to Florida, they can figure out how to afford it with their own money. Sadie starts crying and asks what this means for her wedding. I tell her that depends on whether she wants to apologize for years of treating me like an embarrassment to the family. She's been telling her friends I'm a loser who lives with his parents, acting ashamed to be related to me. Now she wants financial help. Peterson packs up his papers and confirms that everything is legally binding. The house is mine. The rental properties are mine. The investment accounts are mine. If Walter and Judith want to contest anything, they're welcome to hire their own lawyer and waste their money on a case they can't win. After Peterson leaves, the three of them just sit there staring at me like I've grown a second head. Walter asks when I became such a cold, calculating person. I remind him of every time he introduced me as his son who was still trying to figure things out. Every golf club conversation where he said I was wasting my potential. Every family dinner where he made comments about real men supporting themselves. Judith tries the guilt route, talking about how they raised me and sacrificed for me and this is how I repay them. I ask her what exactly she sacrificed. Rose paid for my clothes and school supplies when I was a kid. Rose drove me to activities and helped with homework. Rose was the one who actually raised me while Walter and Judith were focused on their careers and social lives. Sadie wants to know what happens now. I tell her they have 30 days to decide if they want to stay as paying tenants or find somewhere else to live. The rent will be $1,500 a month, which is actually below market rate for this area. No family discount beyond that. Walter starts talking about how I'm destroying the family over money. I tell him I'm not destroying anything. I'm just done pretending their treatment of me was acceptable. He can't seem to understand that his actions have consequences. But here's where it gets really interesting. Saturday morning I get a text from Sadie asking if we can talk privately. She comes over that afternoon and immediately starts with a completely different approach. Instead of the tears and guilt trips, she tries to position herself as the reasonable one. She tells me she understands why I'm angry about how the family treated me, and she admits they probably should have been more supportive of my choices, but she asks if I really want to punish her for Walter and Judith's mistakes. She explains that her wedding is in 4 months and she's already put deposits down on everything. The venue alone cost $3,000 and that's money she can't get back. She had been counting on help from Walter and Judith, but now their retirement savings are gone and they can't contribute anything. I ask her directly what she's asking me to do. Does she want me to pay for her wedding? Does she want me to give Walter and Judith money for Florida? Does she want me to pretend this whole thing never happened? She can't give me a straight answer. She keeps talking about family and how we should support each other, but she won't actually admit what she did wrong or ask for a specific favor. So I tell her exactly what it would take for me to consider helping with wedding costs. Walter, Judith, and Sadie need to sit down with me and acknowledge what they tried to do. They need to admit they were planning to make me homeless to fund their lifestyle upgrades. They need to apologize for years of treating me like a second-class family member, and they need to do all of this in front of Sadie's fiancé, Caesar, so he knows exactly what kind of family he's marrying into. Sadie goes pale and asks if that's really necessary. I tell her that's the price of my cooperation, full honesty and public accountability. She leaves without agreeing to anything, but I know she's going to talk to Walter and Judith about it. Yesterday I got 12 missed calls from Walter and a text saying we need to have a family meeting. But here's what they don't know yet. I've been documenting everything Peterson told us, and I've been researching the rental market in our area. Turns out Walter and Judith are going to have a very expensive awakening when they realize what apartments actually cost these days. And those rental properties I mentioned? I've been thinking it might be time to sell them and invest in something bigger, maybe a commercial property. The timing couldn't be better with the market the way it is. This family meeting should be very enlightening. Update 2. This is getting absolutely wild, and I need to share what happened because Walter's latest move was so desperate and manipulative that even I didn't see it coming. The family meeting happened, but not before Walter tried to turn Sadie's fiancé against me with a whole elaborate sob story. Let me back up to Monday because that's when things really started escalating. Caesar texted me asking if we could meet for coffee because Sadie was having panic attacks about the wedding and he didn't understand what was happening with our family situation. I meet Caesar at this place downtown and the guy looks like he hasn't slept in days. He immediately starts explaining how Sadie has been crying non-stop since our conversation, calling off work and spending hours on the phone with wedding vendors trying to figure out what they can afford without Walter and Judith's financial help. According to Caesar, Walter had been bragging to him for months about their real estate investment strategy, how they'd been building equity in the family home and timing the sale perfectly with the market peak. Walter specifically told Caesar that I didn't know about their plans because I wouldn't understand the financial complexity of their decision. So not only were they planning to blindside me with homelessness, they were actively lying to Sadie's fiancé about my awareness of the situation. They wanted to look like savvy investors taking care of business while protecting their simple-minded son from adult concerns. Caesar asks me to explain what really happened. So I lay out the whole story about Rose's will and the inheritance. I show him copies of the documents Peterson reviewed. I watch his face change as he realizes his future in-laws have been building their retirement and his wedding plans on property they never owned. But here's the part that really gets me. Caesar tells me Walter had been positioning himself as some kind of real estate expert in conversations with Caesar's family. Caesar's parents are immigrants who've been saving to buy their first house, and Walter offered to help them navigate the market when they're ready. Walter has been using my inheritance as proof of his real estate knowledge, telling Caesar's family about this great investment property he owns and how much it's appreciated. He's been building credibility with his future in-laws based on assets that belong to me. I asked Caesar what else Walter has told his family, and it gets worse. Walter apparently mentioned that he might be able to help them find properties similar to his current investment, maybe even connect them with his realtor for family rates. So Walter has been using my inheritance to build social status while planning to make me homeless. The level of manipulation here is staggering. Caesar asks what this means for the wedding, and I tell him that depends on what kind of people Sadie and her parents choose to be going forward. If they want to apologize and start treating me with basic respect, we can work something out. If they want to keep playing games, things are going to get very complicated. That evening Walter shows up at my door around 8 o'clock and he's clearly been preparing for this conversation all day. He starts with this completely different approach, talking about how we're both adults and we should be able to work out a reasonable solution that benefits everyone. Walter explains that he understands I'm upset about the inheritance situation and he admits they should have discussed their plans with me before moving forward. But he says the family has always operated as a unit making decisions together and he assumed I'd want what's best for everyone. He suggests we could structure some kind of arrangement where I keep the house but help them with retirement costs, or maybe I could buy them a smaller place in Florida in exchange for all the years they maintain the property. He presents this like it's a generous compromise. Instead of him asking me to pay for his retirement with my own money, I just stare at him and ask if he seriously thinks I'm going to reward him for trying to steal from me. Walter gets defensive and starts talking about how he never tried to steal anything, how he genuinely believed the house belonged to him and Judith after all these years of taking care of it. But then I bring up the conversation with Caesar and Walter's whole reasonable act falls apart. I ask him why he was telling Caesar's family about his real estate expertise when he doesn't actually own any real estate. Why was he offering to help them find properties when he was planning to sell the only property he had access to? Walter can't answer that because we both know he was using my assets to build relationships and credibility. He was planning to leverage my inheritance for social capital right up until the moment he planned to kick me out. The conversation goes downhill fast from there. Walter starts getting frustrated with my refusal to negotiate, and eventually he falls back on the same old patterns. He tells me I'm being ungrateful for everything the family has done for me. He says Rose would be disappointed in how selfish I've become. That's when I decide it's time to really show him how this is going to work. I tell Walter that I've been looking into the rental market and I've realized $1,500 a month was actually too generous. Fair market rent for this house would be closer to $2,000, especially considering the recent improvements and the neighborhood appreciation. Walter's face goes white and he asks if I'm seriously going to charge them $2,000 a month to live in what he still thinks of as the family home. I remind him that it was never the family home. It's my house, and if he wants to live here, he pays what any other tenant would pay. But I'm not done. I also tell him that I've decided to sell 2 of the rental properties in Millfield County. The market is great right now and I want to invest in something bigger, maybe a small apartment complex or some commercial real estate. Walter asks why I'm telling him this, and I explain that those properties currently house families who've been reliable tenants for years, but the new owners might want to renovate and flip the houses, which would mean the current tenants would need to find new housing pretty quickly. Walter still doesn't get it, so I spell it out for him. The rental market in our area is brutal right now. Average rent for a decent 2-bedroom apartment is $1,800 minimum. And most places require first month, last month, and security deposit up front. That's over $5,000 just to move in, assuming they can even find availability. With Walter's retirement savings depleted and no house sale proceeds coming, where exactly does he think he and Judith are going to live if they can't afford to stay here? That's when Walter finally understands the position he's in. He's not just dealing with a hurt son who needs to be managed. He's dealing with his landlord, and his landlord has zero emotional attachment to making his life easy. Walter tries to backtrack, talking about how we can work something out as family, how surely I don't want to see my parents struggling in their retirement years. But I just ask him if he was worried about me struggling when he was planning to make me homeless in January. The meeting ends with Walter agreeing to think about the rental terms, but I can tell he's starting to panic about their financial situation. Wednesday morning I get a call from Sadie asking if the 3 of them can come over Thursday evening for the family meeting I'd requested. But Wednesday afternoon something happens that changes the whole dynamic. Caesar shows up at my work site around 3, and he looks furious. Apparently Walter went to Caesar's parents' house Tuesday night and told them a completely different version of our family situation. Walter explained that I'd been having some kind of breakdown since Rose died, making claims about inheriting property that belonged to the family. He said they were trying to handle the situation quietly, but they wanted Caesar's family to understand why the wedding plans might need to change. Walter actually suggested that Sadie might want to postpone the wedding until our family situation stabilized because he wasn't sure if I was mentally competent to make important decisions about the inheritance. Caesar is livid because his parents are now questioning whether their son should marry into a family where there's mental illness and financial instability. Walter essentially tried to sabotage Sadie's engagement to protect himself from the consequences of his own actions. I tell Caesar exactly what documents I can show his parents to prove Walter is lying, and I give him Peterson's contact information so they can verify everything independently. Caesar apologizes for his future father-in-law's behavior and asks what he can do to help fix this mess. That's when I realize Walter has made a massive miscalculation. He's not just fighting me anymore. He's fighting Caesar's entire family, who now see him as a liar willing to destroy his daughter's relationship to cover his own mistakes. Tonight is the family meeting, and Walter has no idea that Caesar is going to be there with documentation proving everything Walter told his parents was false. I've been preparing for this confrontation for 3 years, but Walter just handed me ammunition I never expected to have. Final update. Well, it's over. Thursday night's family meeting was the nuclear option I've been building toward for 3 years. And watching Walter's world collapse in real time was everything I hoped it would be. Some of you predicted he'd try to manipulate his way out of this, but I don't think anyone expected the level of desperation he showed when he realized he'd lost control of the narrative. The meeting was supposed to start at 7, but Caesar showed up at 6 with a folder full of documents and a look that could kill. He'd spent the day getting statements from Peterson, copies of the inheritance paperwork, and a timeline of Walter's lies to his family. Caesar was done playing nice with his future father-in-law. Walter, Judith, and Sadie arrive right on time, and you can tell they've been strategizing. They walk in with this united front energy, like they're going to present some kind of reasonable family solution that I'll have to accept. Walter's carrying a folder too, probably full of maintenance receipts and utility bills he thinks prove something. But then they see Caesar sitting at the kitchen table with his paperwork spread out and the whole dynamic shifts. Sadie immediately asks what Caesar is doing here, and I tell her that since Walter decided to involve Caesar's family in our business, Caesar has some questions he'd like answered. Walter tries to take control of the conversation, suggesting we should keep this between immediate family members. That's when Caesar speaks up and asks Walter to explain why he told Caesar's parents that I was having mental health issues and making false claims about inheritance. The room goes dead silent. Judith looks confused and asks what Caesar is talking about. Sadie stares at Walter like she's seeing him for the first time. Walter's face is turning red and he starts stammering about how there must have been some misunderstanding. Caesar pulls out his phone and starts reading from notes he took during his conversation with his parents. Walter had told them that I'd been acting erratically since Rose died, making claims about property ownership that weren't based in reality. He'd suggested that the family was dealing with some kind of mental health crisis that might affect the wedding plans. Walter had specifically asked Caesar's parents to keep an eye on me if they encountered me at family events because he wasn't sure if I was competent to make important decisions about financial matters. Sadie explodes at this point, demanding to know why Walter would say those things about me to her future in-laws. Walter tries to backtrack, claiming he was just trying to prepare them for some family difficulties, but Caesar isn't having it. Caesar explains that his parents spent 2 days researching mental health resources and discussing whether their son should postpone the wedding because of concerns about marrying into an unstable family. Walter's lies nearly destroyed Sadie's engagement. That's when I decide it's time to stop letting Walter control any part of this conversation. I pull out the rental agreements for the 3 properties in Millfield County and spread them on the table. I explain that these houses generate $4,200 a month in rental income, money I've been using to build my construction business and save for equipment purchases. Walter interrupts and asks what this has to do with our current situation. I tell him it has everything to do with our situation because I've decided to sell all 3 properties to a development company that specializes in house flipping. The sales will close in 6 weeks, which means the current tenants will receive 30-day notices to vacate. 3 families who've been stable renters for years are going to be displaced into a rental market where average rent has increased 40% in the past 2 years. Judith asks why I'm telling them this, and I explain that Walter and Judith are about to find out exactly how expensive housing has become for people without significant assets. I slide a printed rental agreement across the table. Market rate for this house is $2,200 a month plus utilities, first month, last month, and security deposit due before move-in. If they want to stay, they can sign the lease and pay the $5,000 move-in cost by the end of next week. Walter picks up the lease and starts reading, and his hands are actually shaking. He asks if I'm seriously going to charge them over $2,000 a month to live in what used to be the family home. I remind him that it was never the family home. It's my property inherited from Rose. And if he wants to live here, he can pay what any other tenant would pay. No family discounts for people who tried to steal from me. Sadie asks what happens if they can't afford the rent. And I tell her they'll need to find somewhere else to live. But they should know that most apartments in this area are running background and credit checks, requiring proof of income that's 3 times the monthly rent. Walter's retirement savings are basically gone after years of assuming he'd have house sale proceeds to fund his Florida plans. Judith's part-time job at the local library pays about $1,500 a month. They don't have the income to qualify for most rental properties, and they definitely don't have the upfront costs. That's when Walter tries his last desperate move. He starts talking about how Rose would never have wanted this kind of division in the family. He says she left me the inheritance because she trusted me to take care of everyone, not to punish people for honest mistakes. I just stare at him and ask if he thinks trying to make me homeless was an honest mistake. Walter starts explaining how they genuinely believed the house belonged to them after all these years, how they were just trying to make smart financial decisions for their retirement. But Caesar interrupts and asks Walter to explain why he was using my inheritance to build credibility with Caesar's family if he didn't know it belonged to me. Walter can't answer that because we all know he was consciously using assets he didn't own to manipulate people. Judith tries a different approach, asking if we can work out some kind of payment plan for the rent. Maybe start at a lower amount and increase it gradually. She suggests that surely we can find a solution that doesn't leave them homeless. I tell her they have exactly the same options as any other tenants. Pay the rent on time or find somewhere else to live. The fact that their family doesn't give them special privileges to steal from me. Sadie finally asks the question she's been avoiding. She wants to know if this means there's no financial help available for the wedding. I tell her that depends on whether she's ready to apologize for 7 years of treating me like an embarrassment to the family. She starts crying and says she's sorry for the things she said about me to her friends. She admits she was wrong to act ashamed of me, and she knows she hurt my feelings with her comments about having a loser brother. But then she asks if I can really blame her for being embarrassed when I was 26 years old and living with my parents, working construction jobs, and acting like I had no ambition for anything better. That's when I realized Sadie still doesn't understand what happened here. She's apologizing for hurting my feelings, but she's not acknowledging that her attitude was fundamentally wrong. She still thinks I was actually a loser who got lucky with an inheritance. I tell Sadie that I was never the failure she thought I was. I was building a business, managing rental properties, and planning for my future while she was telling people I was wasting my life. Her embarrassment was based on her own ignorance and arrogance. Walter makes one final attempt to regain control. He suggests that maybe we should all take a step back and think about this situation more carefully. He says emotions are running high and we might make decisions we'll regret later. But I'm done with Walter's manipulation tactics. I tell him he has 1 week to decide if he wants to sign the lease or start looking for alternative housing. After that, I'll be advertising the house for rent to outside tenants. I also mentioned that I've been in contact with a property management company about handling the rental if Walter and Judith move out. The company specializes in luxury rentals and thinks they can get $2,500 a month for this house with some minor updates. The meeting ends with Walter and Judith asking for time to discuss their options. Sadie leaves without saying goodbye and Caesar stays behind to apologize again for Walter's behavior with his family. This morning I got a text from Sadie saying they've decided to sign the lease and asking if I'll consider helping with some wedding expenses since they're staying as tenants. I haven't responded yet. But here's the thing she doesn't know. The development company buying my rental properties has offered me a partnership opportunity on a larger project, a 20-unit apartment complex that I'd help manage in exchange for an ownership stake. I'm thinking about accepting the offer and using the apartment complex to house some of Walter's golf buddies when they realize their retirement savings aren't going as far as they expected in this housing market. Turns out treating someone like garbage for 7 years has consequences that compound over time. Who could have predicted that? Walter wanted to know when I became such a cold, calculating person. The answer is the day he started treating me like I was worthless. I just waited until I had enough power to return the favor. This is Hidden Lies, and I'll catch you in the next one.